I took the Norwegian Getaway on my second Norwegian cruise of the year, and I'm here to tell you what I thought. Now, I did take the Norwegian Encore to Alaska back in April, and honestly, I ranked Norwegian third out of four for my Alaskan cruise experiences. I'll link to my Norwegian Encore review in the description, so you might wonder why I chose Norwegian again. And the answer is simply that I had a future cruise credit because the price of that Alaskan cruise came down. So I had a few $100s off that I could apply to another Norwegian cruise. And honestly, the itinerary of this Norwegian Getaway cruise looked really appealing. It was a 7-day New England and Canadian cruise with 5 different ports, plus New York City was the embarkation and disembarkation port, and I had never been there. There was only one sea day scheduled, and it was at the end of the cruise. I'd been to only one of the ports before, so this itinerary meant plenty of time off the ship. A good itinerary, plus it being the cheapest option with the future cruise credit, sealed the deal, so we booked it. Worth noting is that because there was so much time off the ship, we didn't get more at sea with this cruise, so no drink package or specialty dining, which was fine. And this is the first cruise I've taken where I haven't gained any weight. So I think not having the drink package was good on that front. There were some things that were out of Norwegian's control that went wrong on this cruise. I also made an error in judgment on this cruise, and Norwegian made some errors as a corporation. Despite this cruise ending up differently than we had anticipated and not having high expectations going in, we did end up having an okay time, but likely won't seek out another Norwegian cruise again. The ship embarkation was on a Sunday in Manhattan, New York. Since we live in the Seattle area, we flew in on a nonstop flight on Saturday. That was when we learned the 2 Canadian ports, St. John and Halifax, would be switched. St. John was originally supposed to be on Friday of the cruise, and it got switched to Thursday, and vice versa for Halifax. We were told the reason was that so we didn't have to tender in Halifax. Similar to Alaska ports, cruise ship excursions in New England and Canada are very expensive. So we booked tours through Viator at a significant cost savings, including a specific excursion in St. John on Friday that we could cancel easily. But the problem was there was no space remaining in the same tour for Thursday. It was great to have some pre-cruise time in New York City, but our flight arrived around 5 p.m. And with the time change, and we weren't sure how long it would take to get from JFK to Midtown Manhattan with luggage, as we used public transportation and then had to walk to the hotel. So we didn't schedule a Broadway show or anything like that for Saturday night. We did know going in that the weather wasn't looking great for our cruise. A nor'easter was forecasted, and one of my friends took the same itinerary 2 years ago on Princess, and she told me that their Newport stop was canceled due to a storm. We did walk through Central Park on Sunday morning, which was amazing, and got to the cruise port at our assigned time. It took about an hour to get on the ship due to lines and Canadian declaration forms that they asked you to fill out, but they didn't seem to verify that you actually did fill them out. Even though we had one of the earliest check-in times, we were group 47. Also, we learned at check-in that they canceled our first 2 ports, Newport and Boston, due to the nor'easter. The New York port was closed, so we couldn't get out in New York until the port opened. We did end up docked in New York until Tuesday morning. I know this was completely out of Norwegian's control, and it's the luck of the draw when you travel during storm season. It did take quite a while to get on board, as I mentioned, and we had our backpacks. I did look at the deck plan, and I knew that Getaway was a breakaway class ship and Encore was breakaway plus. So the design and deck plans were very similar. And since I had been on Encore only 6 months ago, it did feel very familiar, with the waterfront on deck 8, the casino on deck 7, and the atrium on deck 6. We oriented to the ship easily and got lunch at the main dining room. It was about 1 p.m. once we finished with lunch, and I'm used to cabins being available by 1:30. This was the longest time we have ever experienced for the cabins to be ready. Our cabin was ready at 2:30, and this is also the first time I've experienced decks being available at different times. They started calling out the ready decks at 1:50, and ours was one of the last to be ready. It was the most waiting if you take into account the hour we waited in the cruise terminal to get on board that I've ever experienced on embarkation day. Now let's get to the part I screwed up. Usually I book a guaranteed room and let them pick my room because I don't care where it is as long as I'm on the ship, and it's usually cheaper to do that. However, for this cruise, the price was the same for picking your room for whatever reason. So I picked an inside room on the end. I thought it would be good to not have neighbors on one side. I also put in the lowest bid possible for a balcony room, which has worked out when I was on the Encore and I noticed this cruise had a lot of rooms available still. So I was confident that the upgrade would go through. The short story is that that upgrade did not happen. And while the cabin looked like it was at the end of a hallway, it really wasn't. There was a door right there that led to crew cabins. So at all times of the day and night, crew were passing in and out of that door. Also, the guest areas are carpeted, but that crew area is not carpeted and sounded like it was linoleum. So we could hear footsteps going up and down those linoleum hallways, doors opening and closing to individual crew rooms, and talking amongst the crews at all hours. I get it that it's their living quarters and they have shifts 24 hours a day, but being next to that is actually a whole lot louder than being next to most guests. Here's our inside cabin. It was small. I've been in an inside cabin on Royal and it was decently sized. On Royal, we had a love seat with a little coffee table in addition to the beds and vanity area with storage. This one was literally just the bed and the vanity with no storage. And it was a super tiny closet. I usually am good with just shelves, but there was only one substantial shelf on top, which was hard to reach for short people. There were some shelves on the side, but they were pretty small. This is the smallest closet I've ever seen on a cruise ship and was also the smallest cabin. What really blew me away was that technically this room could hold 4 people. I have no idea how 4 people could have shared that one tiny closet. As I said, the itinerary changed from the original plan due to the nor'easter, and that's part of cruising life. However, a lot of the ship's outside areas were closed due to the weather as well. Once we actually departed on Tuesday after embarking on Sunday, the outside walking areas on decks 7 and 8 were closed due to rough seas. The seasickness bags were quickly put out after departing. The top decks were open, but I never once saw the water slide or ropes course open. I'm pretty confident these were closed the entire cruise, and I had wanted to try them. I did put my hands in the hot tubs as I wanted to enjoy that, but the hot tubs were lukewarm at best. It would not have been enjoyable to sit in tepid water. Norwegian could have made those lukewarm hot tubs hotter. They were also lukewarm on the Encore, so it seems like it's a Norwegian Cruise Line choice. Being on a cruise in bad weather isn't great for a whole host of reasons, including rocky seas and people not being able to disperse to outside areas, which makes the inside public areas very crowded. There were some good things about this ship that I will get to shortly, but I'd say the worst thing about this ship is that there is only one inside public area that has windows to the outside. That's on deck 8 next to the mojito bar. There are a couple of windows in the atrium, but that area has its own problems. More on that later. Now, on Norwegian Encore, there are 2 inside public areas with windows, and those are the observation lounge and the district, which is a brew house, but also a sitting area during the day. And I can see why now that I've been on Getaway, why Encore is an upgrade with having those seating areas with windows. When you have an inside cabin and almost of the outside areas are closed or too miserable to actually be at, it does get claustrophobic on this ship. I think this is a good spot to tell you about what I loved about this ship. The Illusionarium is at the front of Deck 6, and it's amazing. It has such a vibrant steampunk early magician feel. I love poking around in the vestibule to that room itself, where you can open drawers and look at the ephemera from that time period. And once you get into the Illusionarium, it's a fabulous place to socialize with these huge booths around the edge and plenty of seating around the stage. It didn't have its own bar that I saw, so you have to get your drinks elsewhere. This was a great venue if you're on this ship with a group, and it's a really nice medium-sized venue. Medium-sized venues are what I think a lot of cruise ships struggle to have, and this is a really good one because I think it will seat 200 to 300 pretty comfortably with everyone able to see and hear what's going on. It doesn't have windows to the outside though. Another venue unique to the Norwegian Getaway was Shanghai's Noodle Bar. We ended up going here twice. We loved it. It's a small space and you get very cozy with your neighbor. But the menu is strong if you like Asian food, and this chocolate dessert was rich and amazing. It's only open from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. It is complimentary, but you have to have reservations since it's so small. I think it would be good if it was also open for lunch to accommodate more guests. A third venue that we liked was the Bliss Lounge. This tended to be very quiet during the day, so you can usually read or play cards here. I got used to the pin lights, and there are some cozy couches on one side. Again, there are no windows to the outside, but this was a decent public area and pretty quiet. One thing we both really disliked on the Encore was the atrium. This is where they have all the game shows, trivia, and pretty much anything that doesn't need the 1,000-seat theater. And the Getaway has the exact same atrium setup, which we think is a hot mess express. I'm going to list everything that's in this area. Guest services, cruise next desk, shore excursions desk, restaurant reservations, internet help desk, Starbucks, a huge bar, and then a seating area where most activities take place. It is pure cacophony, and we did go to the officer talk, and that wasn't, we were seated pretty close, but we were under a ceiling and kind of in a cove close to loud people, so we couldn't hear anything. I do usually want to attend game shows and trivia, but I think it needs its own space. My anxiety goes up sitting or standing in this venue with all the different conversations related to the various services in the space, plus people making conversations as they wait for events to start. Back to what I like about the Norwegian Getaway. There are two main things that I think Norwegian does very well. First, there's the casual dress code. I love that I can wear sweatshirts and jeans to dinner at the main dining room and most specialty restaurants. If you want to dress up, you can. There are people that dress up around the ship, and I love that for them. I just don't want to be forced to dress up. And second, I love that you can walk up to the dining room for dinner when you want to. As much as I like to dine at 5 p.m. on most nights because I'm an old lady, I do like the flexibility, especially if it's a longer day in port and you want to get dinner whenever you get back. And I didn't do specialty dining on this cruise. We went to the main dining room, the Noodle Bar, the American Diner, and Oceans for all our meals. And it was a lot of menu deja vu in the main dining room. For example, each day's menu was exactly the same as it was in our Norwegian Encore cruise 6 months prior. I had the exact menu options each day. So my complaints from 6 months ago still exist. There were no menu items related to the New England itinerary, like New England clam chowder. There was no salmon on the menu like you see on other cruise lines. There's no lobster night like you'll see on Royal Caribbean or Princess. And now there's a new $5 upcharge if you order more than one entree at dinner. Sure, it's a relatively low cost, but as someone who's cognizant of food waste, I usually only order 2 entrees if there are 2 that intrigue me, or I've prearranged to split the second entree with someone else in my party. So this change mostly just annoyed me. But unlike Royal Caribbean and Princess, I wasn't tempted to order 2 main dishes most nights because on the whole, I found the dinner menus to be lacking. I do think Norwegian's lunch items at the main dining room are pretty good, but dinner, I just rate as okay. I did really like the noodle bar, so if you like Asian food, do check this out. And as I said, the chocolate dessert was my favorite. The American Diner on the top deck is a complimentary restaurant, and I really enjoy their white bean chicken chili. I did walk through the buffet once to see if I was missing something, and I thought the menu is pretty standard there. Even though I found dinner lacking most nights in the main dining room, I did still eat there, and I didn't feel like I needed to go to the buffet to eat. Entertainment was middle of the road on this cruise. As I said previously, I do not like Norwegian's atrium. Most of the game shows and trivia take place in the atrium, so I miss those. The marriage show also takes place here, and I think it should be moved to the theater because it's pretty popular. This was the first time I've ever missed the marriage show, and that was because it was on Monday night, and we decided to see an off-Broadway show that night as we were still docked in New York City. The stand-up comedians were pretty good on this cruise, significantly better than the ones on Norwegian Encore, and that was a positive. As for the stage shows, they did a 90s show that we really enjoyed. I thought that skewed pretty young demographically, as I'm not sure it connected with the older cruisers, but I really enjoyed it. They also have a Broadway cabaret rock edition with that same cast. This was mainly songs from musicals with a hard rock edge put in. I'm not a fan of musicals, so most of the time I couldn't identify the original song unless the lyrics gave it away, like a song from Hamilton. If you're a fan of musicals, then I think you'll like this show. The cast also had a third show called Wild Cards, where each cast member was a different playing card. I was impressed that the cast put on 3 different shows throughout the week. The rock cabaret and Wild Cards weren't that great of material for the cast to work with, but they did a good job. The other show in the theater is the Fleetwood Mac Tribute Band. They play the whole Rumors album, and between each song, they explain the origins of the next song. If you even somewhat like Fleetwood Mac, I highly recommend this show. They were awesome. For most of the week, they played at the bar venue called Sid Norman's, but their big show of the week is that Fleetwood Mac tribute. When I think back to this cruise, the highlights were definitely when we were off the ship. Riding a bike through Acadia National Park, going to an off-Broadway show, walking through Central Park on Sunday morning, and watching all the joggers there, seeing the Citadel in Halifax, walking to the reversing pools in St. John. The on-ship experience was okay, but I just don't think I'm that much of a fan of Norwegian. Admittedly, both Norwegian cruises I've been on have been during crummy weather, so I wasn't able to take full advantage of the on-ship experience. But even so, I think the disadvantages of Norwegian outweigh the advantages of a relaxed dress code and flexible dining times. Sadly, even 2 meh experiences, I don't think I'll be cruising on Norwegian again unless I opt for the solo cruising experience. I've heard good things about solo cruising with them, especially with how they cultivate friendships with other solo cruisers. My cruise fare without the future cruise credit applied was $2,073.42. This includes prepaid gratuities and an inside room for 2 people. And as I mentioned earlier, we didn't have more at sea. This works out to be $148 per person per day. Please like this video if you found it worthwhile and subscribe to my channel. Thanks.